Hi everyone, Professor Henry here with some feedback on our conversation about Gustavo Arellano's article, Taco USA, How Mexican Food Became More American Than Apple Pie. Which, by the way, it's worth mentioning that this article is actually a chapter from Arellano's book, Taco USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America. Our primary discussion question was about how or why we might consider Arellano's text an academic text. With that, vámonos. Let's go. Primero, una lección de español. First, a Spanish lesson. Because I love so much how so many of my Anglophone students expressed concern over pronouncing Gustavo Arellano's name well. By Anglophone, I mean my students who hear, speak, and read primarily in English. I view this as a sign of good academic behavior. You're unsure, you want to do well, and you're expressing a desire to be culturally sensitive. This, coupled with the fact that we're discussing an article that explores Mexican cultural influence in the United States via food, makes me think that it's worth taking a few minutes to honor all of that and talk about pronouncing Spanish words and names. So I have 3 tips for you. Pronouncing vowels, recognizing letter patterns and their associated sounds, and finding the syllable to emphasize. Now before those tips though, here's my initial disclaimer. I'm an Anglophone myself. Although I have a good sense of how to pronounce words in a few other languages, and I have an understanding of basic Spanish grammar, I am not fluent in any other language. I can read and write in Spanish as long as I have a dictionary, porque mi vocabulario es muy limitado. Pero I cannot hold a conversation in Spanish or in any language other than English. But here's what I do know about how to pronounce words and names like Gustavo Arellano. So tip number 1. It wasn't until I understood how vowels work in Spanish that I really started to get some confidence in Spanish pronunciation. Spanish is one of a few languages that uses what linguists refer to as continental vowels. Whereas A, E, I, O, and U are the letters and the sounds of vowels in English, continental vowels like those in Spanish sound like this. A, E, I, O, U. Practice that with me. A, I, O, U. Spanish vowels sound like that. Another interesting things about vowels in Spanish is that there are virtually no diphthongs. Wait, what the hell is a diphthong? Well, it's a complex word for a simple concept. A diphthong is when a vowel changes its sound or shape as you speak it. Take this name for example. Say it to yourself. David. Pay attention to that first vowel sound in the first syllable. David. Hear that E sound happen even though the vowel is an A? That's a diphthong. And diphthongs are all over English words, but not so much in Spanish. This same name in Spanish would not be pronounced David. Imagine the sound in your head with our Spanish vowels. Remember, A, I, O, U. Not David, because there are little to no diphthongs in Spanish. Instead, David. So in Spanish, one vowel, one sound. David. Gustavo. Tip number 2. Just like there are certain letter patterns in English that we pronounce differently than they're spelled, the same is true in Spanish. In English, for example, we have words like show that aren't pronounced S-how or S-how, we recognize the letter pattern of SH or TH, and we know that they have a special sound. English. Show. Spanish has letter patterns like that too, and one of those patterns involves a double L followed by a vowel. LLA, LLE, LLO, etc. Those letter patterns are not pronounced like they're spelled to English-speaking eyes. You do not pronounce the L's. Instead, the double L makes more of a Y sound. And the vowel at the end finishes the sound. So LLA is ya. LLE, ye. LLO, yo. So it's not Arellano, it's Arellano. LLA, ya, Arellano. Tip number 3. Spanish tends to emphasize the penultimate syllable. By penultimate, I mean the next to last syllable. This generally holds true, but for 2 exceptions that I can think of. The word might have an accent mark, in which case you place the emphasis where the accent mark is. For example, por ejemplo, which incidentally is for example in Spanish. Por ejemplo. Right? Ejemplo. The accent goes on the penultimate syllable, as I have bolded on the text here. Ejemplo. However, the next word, último, the accent is on the first syllable because there's an accent mark there. It's not on the second to last syllable. It is not último, it is último. So, taking all of this into account, our author's name is pronounced Gustavo Arellano. As a bonus tip, not Arellanillo, like Español, right? Where some words in Spanish do that little turnaround with the N, right? It is Arellano, not Arellanillo, because there is no Nya above the N in Arellano's name. Instead, the N is like how we would pronounce it in English, Arellano. Thanks again to all of my Anglophone students who expressed concern about this. Good for you. And thank you to my Hispanophone students for enduring a few minutes of my gringo Spanish. Ahora, dale. On to the big question. How is Arellano's article academic? I love using this article as an example, because in some ways it's not traditionally academic. As many of you pointed out, he writes from a point of personal experience, personal observations, and he's pretty funny at times. In fact, many of you see that as a specific strategy Arellano uses to bring his readers in to the more scholarly points that he makes later in the article. You might be surprised to know that although many academic genres don't often include humor, many academic genres do consider varying kinds of personal experience and observations as valid evidence, just so long as that isn't your only form of evidence. Here's something for you to think about. Based on your research so far, does your discipline consider personal observations as valid evidence? That's something worth exploring as we continue to move forward. Many of you also commented on how informative Arellano's article is, citing that as a clear sign of being an academic text. Some of you qualified that even further, pointing out how he's informative. Indeed, he offers a historical overview of several different eras of Mexican food in the United States, from 19th century Chile queens to 21st century restaurants where waiters' secret salsa is reserved for the aficionados. To accomplish this overview, he includes other writers' historical texts and analyses of those texts, and he cites everything. This is what takes personal observation and informative writing to the scholarly level. Through these writing strategies, Arellano joins the intellectual conversation about Mexican food in the United States. Some of you also commented on how Arellano backs up his claims with evidence. And although I agree, I do want to take just a moment to unpack the idea of backing up claims. I can remember my first few years writing in college and thinking that if I had an idea, I couldn't really include that idea in my writing unless some other expert had the same idea. So in order to back up my idea, I had to cite that expert who had the same idea. Thank the gods and goddesses of rhetoric that our rhetorical approach to academic writing is different than this. For the conversation in academic writing is much more nuanced and leaves more room for original thinking. I imagine that Arellano's process in writing his book might have been something more like this. He made some observations about the world and felt compelled to write or respond. He encountered some texts on the topic and felt compelled to write and respond with his own observations. In his past and present readings, he found some texts that he agreed with, yet he wanted to add something new to those conversations. He also found some texts that he disagreed with and wanted to explain why he disagreed. Ultimately, he saw that the old conversation needed to be updated. So the big takeaway here is that, yes, you can have your own views. Arellano has his own views. He shows his readers how he arrived at his views through his historical overview. He shows his readers how his views relate to the views of others. He agrees and adds something new, he disagrees, or he explains why he disagrees, or he even offers a combination plate of both. And that, my friends, is super academic-y indeed.